Carlos Tevez was undoubtedly a fantastic footballer. Blessed with incredible talent, he also backed that up with a drive and tenacity that was unmatched by most. However, throughout his career, there were always some suggestions that he could have done a little more for the teams he played for. From refusing to speak English whilst playing in the Premier League, to one saying he viewed his spell in China as a holiday, and everything in between. Today, we're taking a look at how good Tevez really was, so stay tuned. Let's take a quick look at how it all began. Tevez was born in 1984 in the crime-ridden slums of Fuerte Apache on the outskirts of Buenos Aires, a stone's throw from Stadio Amalfitani, home of Vélez Sarsfield. During the tumultuous dictatorship years of the 70s and 80s in Argentina, was designated a place to house low-income families. You can probably guess what happens next. That's right, crime prevailed and Tevez found himself in the middle of it as a youngster. After being accidentally scalded with boiling water as an infant, his mother abandoned him and he was brought up by his uncle and aunt. He's also known for his unusual teeth, which came as a result of street fighting as a youth. During his time at Boca Juniors, Tevez was offered the chance to have his neck scar cosmetically altered, an offer which he rejected. His reasoning was that it had become a part of him and it signified his tough upbringing. After signing for Boca in 1997 from his youth team All Boys, which also brought about a name change, he was born Carlos Alberto Martinez, Tevez would go on to make his debut for the club as a fresh-faced 16-year-old. After a few solid years with Boca, he was sold to Brazilian club Corinthians for £15 million, where he would help deliver their fourth league title. However, he wasn't long for Brazil, and in 2006, Tevez and fellow countryman and Corinthians teammate Javier Mascherano made the move to England and West Ham United. The move came after Tevez had refused to play for the Brazilian club, which was a sign of things to come. So what sort of player was he? Anyone who watched Premier League football in the late 2000s and early 2010s will be able to tell you that Carlos Tevez struck fear into the centre-backs up and down the country. Never a prolific goalscorer in the purest sense of the word, Tevez relied more on his drive and ability to hassle opponents into making mistakes. This is what made him such an asset. Having spent a year with West Ham, he made the move to Manchester United in a messy transfer saga, full of argument over who actually owned his registration. Early on in his career at United, he was in direct competition with players like Park Ji-sung and Ryan Giggs. But Alex Ferguson quickly realised how much of a weapon the Argentine could be, as he showed immense qualities in leading the press. This resulted in him forming one of the deadliest front threes of the late 2000s, alongside Wayne Rooney and Cristiano Ronaldo, with Tevez doing a lot of the running, particularly for Ronaldo. His time at United was littered with trophies, winning everything but the FA Cup, but in 2009 he showed more of his temperamental side as he did the unthinkable and forced a move away from United, landing at crosstown rivals Manchester City. This, of course, didn't go down well with the Old Trafford faithful. What happened next then? Well, having signed a 5-year deal with the Citizens, Tevez was initially a hit at the Etihad Stadium, helping the team win their first Premier League title. But controversy was never far away where Tevez was concerned. City right-back and fellow Argentine Pablo Zabaleta would later claim that he urged Tevez to learn the language. He famously didn't speak English. But the former Boca man flat-out refused. He also famously criticised Manchester while City captain back in 2011, claiming the city had nothing. This would further alienate him from the club and its fans. Recently, Tevez appeared on a radio show in his homeland and explained why he didn't want to learn the language, citing his uncle's PTSD and alcoholism as a result of the Falklands War conflict. Of course, the UK and Argentina briefly went to war in the early 80s, but this sounds like a pretty weak excuse. Tevez had no problem working for and being paid obscene amounts of money by British clubs, so if he was so against the UK and its politics towards Argentina, why did he make the move in the first place? It sounds more like he simply couldn't be bothered to learn the language and tried to come across as a martyr to cover. After 73 goals in 148 games for City, Tevez was again on the move as he had become too much for City to handle. Famously refusing to come off the bench against Bayern Munich, it was decided the best course of action would be to sell him to get his huge contract off the club's wage bill, and he was sold to Juventus for just €9 million. Next up, we're talking Italy. Carlos Tevez's 2 seasons in Turin were a resounding success. Taking over the legendary number 10 shirt from arguably Juventus' best player of all time, Alessandro Del Piero, there was a certain amount of expectation on his shoulders, and he simply flourished. Tevez's strike rate during his time in northern Italy was better than 1 in 2. which saw him voted the club's player of the season in 2013 to 2014. The following season, Tevez almost won his second Champions League as he took the club to the final in Berlin against Barcelona. Sadly for Tevez and Juventus, they were to come up against a Lionel Messi-inspired Barca side who was simply irresistible. The disappointment of Berlin was too much for Tevez, however, and after 50 goals in 95 games for the Bianconeri, the man from Porto Alegre would head home back to Boca Juniors in a bid to win the Argentine Primera Division with his boyhood club. Of course, he managed to achieve his goal in 2015, adding to his vast collection of silverware by bagging the 7th league title of his career and simultaneously proving how prolific his career had been. Somewhat strangely though, Tevez was about to make one of the most bizarre decisions of his high-profile, sometimes controversial career by signing on to play in the Chinese Super League with Shanghai Shenhua. So, what went down in China? By 2017, the 33-year-old Tevez was past the peaks of his powers, but his move to China still attracted some old glances. And once again, much like the majority of his career, the move was shrouded in controversy. If anyone needed an explanation as to why he made the move, you need to look no further than his immense salary package. With a contract that would reportedly make him the world's highest paid player, it was rumored the Argentinian was making $41 million a year. Of course, Tevez wasn't about to just get his head down and do his work either, as he attracted criticism from his manager, Wu Jingyu, who claimed that Tevez was unfit and overweight. His return of just 4 goals in 16 games, in a league which was far, far beneath him and his worldly talents, was proof that he might not have given it his all. This was enough for fans of the club to balk at the $600k plus he was making per week, and his days were numbered, soon returning to Boca. In another incident which won him no fans in China, he was pictured in Disneyland whilst his team was playing a league game, claiming that he was injured. Tevez would later describe his time in China as a holiday, a comment which just goes to show how out of touch he was during that time in his career. How good was he then? Carlos Tevez was an immense talent. After returning to Boca from Juventus, his form was enough to earn himself a recall to the national team after years in the international wilderness. During the early part of his career, the young Carlitos was being talked about in the same breath as one Diego Maradona. Unfortunately for Tevez though, along came a certain Lionel Messi to wrestle away that particular crown. All round though, Tevez was a fantastic player. On the pitch, he was the kind of guy you want with you in the trenches, a player who never gave up a lost cause, with a unique ability to force defenders into making mistakes. He finished his career on 308 goals from 746 appearances, which in the era of Messi and Ronaldo doesn't seem that much, which is pretty wild. But this was a man who would pop up in the fullback positions to help his teammates out, so he offered much, much more to the cause than just goals. His one problem, as you might have guessed throughout this video, was his inability to simply get on with his job and play football. At virtually every club he played for, there were problems which included transfer requests, refusal to follow orders from management, and a bizarre attitude of refusing to learn the language of the country he lived in for 7 years. I mean, it takes a unique sort of person to break the divide of city rivals and play for the other team, something he appeared to have little problem with. Had Tevez chosen to simply get on with it and do what he was being paid for, an incredible amount of money to do, then it's possible we could be here talking about one of the all-time great strikers. His attitude and off-field problems ultimately hindered his career, and probably resulted in missing out on a few more trophies. Not that he'll mind, considering his huge Chinese payday, mind you. Tevez will go down as one of the best foreign imports into English football, probably for that drive and determination alone. Of course, it helped that the man could play a little and knew where the back of the net was. As usual, thanks for dropping in on us today, and remember to swing by next time where we're going to be discussing loads more cool bits and pieces. Why not do us a big favour by liking and sharing today's video, as well as subscribing to our channel so you don't miss out on more great videos in the future. Bye guys!